Hi, welcome to the Power 365 show. I'm excited to introduce to you Reuben Krippner, a Microsoft veteran of nearly 14 years, to discuss the Power Platform and PowerApps. Reuben has been with Microsoft for over 13 years in a variety of roles, including Microsoft Consulting Services, Partner Technical Readiness, Technical Product Marketing, Program Management, Pre-Sales, Solution Architecture. Currently, Reuben leads a team of solution architects in EMEA focused on working with customers to understand and plan their use of Microsoft Power Platform to deliver business value to their organizations. For full show notes, anything we chatted about, mentioned, links, etc., they'll be found at nz365guy.com/68. Now, let's get on with the show. Reuben, welcome to the Power 365 show.
No worries. Thanks, mate.
Good to have you on here. Interesting. And an Aussie on the other side of the world, like me, traveling from New Zealand up here, it's a long way from home. Do you miss home much?
Every day, particularly this time of year, as we plunge into the gloom in the UK. It's as you're aware, down the southern hemisphere, it's the best time of year.
Yeah, and everyone's sending their snaps of out at the beach and stuff like that, and it's just
Yeah, there's nothing worse, particularly New Year's. I'm fed up with photos of people on the beach and enjoying barbecues and wearing shorts, which is a passion of mine.
Closely followed by Australia Day, which is always a good function.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I miss it. I miss it every day, my friend.
Yeah. So you're originally from Aussie. You've lived and worked overseas, I assume, for quite a bit of your career now. First in Microsoft US, and now you're in the UK sub. Kind of, what's been your journey into Microsoft and across the different roles you're into where you are now?
No worries. Yeah. So I've actually had 2 stints in the US, 2 stints in the UK. So I've been a bit of a journeyman. Even in Oz, I was around Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth for a bit. But in terms of what got me on board was very early on in my career. I was working with a company that built software for McDonald's franchisees. Believe it or not.
Okay.
And one day my boss came to me and said, "Look, we need to build an executive information system." So for those that have been around, would know the EIS acronym. And we sort of ummed and ahed about what tool we would use to kind of build this. And we settled on, it was either Borland or Microsoft Access 1.0. And so we thought about it and we said, well, which company do we think is going to be around in 5 years? And so we picked Microsoft and that started the journey. And then from there got into building out more sophisticated apps on Access, and then got into building some, VB3 code, and over time landed a job at a Microsoft partner that had got into this new era or this new area of CRM. Did some work with a company called Onyx, which is, along with Siebel and Clarify, were the 3 big players in the CRM market. And then moved to the UK and was working with Onyx there for a few years, and was all set to head back to Oz, and got a call from Microsoft, and they were kind of in the early stages of Microsoft. It was Microsoft CRM 1.0 at that point in time. I came on board as the first Microsoft Consulting Services employee in the UK. And from there, the rest is history. Moved into a partner technical role, then got the opportunity to go and move for Corp and worked in technical product marketing, got into the engineering team and did some program management around social. Moved to the Office 365 team for a couple of years, and then sort of said, well, look, we've got 3 young kids under 4. Maybe if I'm going to step off the merry-go-round for a year, it might be the best time to do it before the kids start school. Took a year off, and then travelled around Oz and took a sabbatical a bit like yourself. And then it came down to where do we kind of want to locate for the long haul. And obviously, as an Aussie, I voted for Australia. My wife's English; she voted for the UK. And look who won.
Yeah, that's not unusual, right?
Exactly.
What's kind of been the core highlights of your career thus far? What are you kind of like? If you were, to walk down the nostalgia lane, what would be some of the key highlights for you?
Look, I think the one that I'm kind of most proud of was the CRM4 launch. I think that was an important milestone in the history of the product. I got to do kind of the global tour that launched it to all different markets. I got to travel the world there, and it was my very first kind of main stage keynote demo at Convergence in that year. So those are pretty big milestones. And then I think in my time in office, I joined the team and was handed the poison chalice of OneDrive for Business, which for those that have worked with it over the years, it was not a product where we needed it to be. And during those 2 years, we as a product group, I think, really turned that product around. And so the next time that I presented at Ignite, we had a round of applause and a huge amount of enthusiasm, and it was really satisfying to kind of be part of the journey that turned that product around and set it on a foundation for longer term success. I think if I pointed at two things, those would be the top two.
Wow. I definitely know most of my digital world sits in OneDrive, so... No, it's becoming an increasingly credible, file storage, file management, productivity tool. So now it's well on its way. Yeah. I was going to ask you what led you to Britain, and that was just so I could get that that in there, off the old TV show. But well, you've made it clear it was your wife.
Well, it was definitely the wife was a leading contributor. It certainly wasn't for the weather and where I'm located. It was not for the food. And it certainly wasn't for the beaches, but there's a lot going for the UK. So it was predominantly family reasons. Let us here.
I've just realised over the last couple of weeks as winter's crept in London that this is the first time I've lived so far away from the ocean.
Exactly.
In Sydney, I used to walk to it every single day. Around the waterfront, and then in New Zealand, you're always just 5 minutes really from it. The coasts are so close together, but it's bizarre.
Yeah. And even then, as a beach snob, which we both are, even the beaches that you do get access to are not what we would consider beaches. They're more like salty lap pools, really.
Yeah. I've never even been to one here in the UK yet.
No, I wouldn't prioritise it if I was there. There's plenty more to see.
So can you tell us a bit about the focus of your role in Microsoft? I was saying your new role, but it's really, you've been in there, about a year, a bit over a year now?
That's the one.
What is it?
So I'm part of Microsoft has these kind of time zone teams. So we sit in support of the subsidiaries where they're trying to sell Microsoft products. And so it's I lead a team of 9 super experienced technical pre-sales resources, and we focus on what we call emerging solutions. So anything that's kind of new to Microsoft relatively from a product perspective that we're still figuring out how to make a business out of it. That's kind of the focus of my team. And that translates down to things like the Adobe partnership, the LinkedIn partnership. We get involved in Dynamics 365 for talent on the HR side. And then obviously the Power Platform, so PowerApps, Flow, Common Data Service, and everything that entails. So it's a pretty big role, pretty important role in terms of getting people fired up and informed about the opportunity. And it's a fair old whack of land that we cover when you look at the Europe and Middle East and Africa. It's phenomenal. It's a great role, to be honest.
It's so just to get this right, so you support the subsidiaries. So for those that don't know, Microsoft, they have the R&D part of their business, but then the rest of the world is broken up into subsidiaries. You have the US subsidiary, UK, and various other countries around the world. So you're actually supporting the kind of the Europe-wide subsidiary base.
Yeah, so we get in and kind of help account teams, partner teams, kind of learn these technologies, but also support them in kind of going after the strategic deals, the strategic customers that we want to get off the ground. And so, it's predominantly a pre-sales role, a technical pre-sales role, but we also get involved in a bit of customer success management. We're also the conduit back to the engineering team. So we have a real mixed bag in terms of what we do, but predominantly it's about how do we, build the next billion-dollar business at Microsoft, and if you look at the platform, it's got everything going for it to be that next billion-dollar business.
So just before we get into, if you like, what the opportunity is out there, and kind of like, let's do a bit of crystal balling, maybe what we see it grow to in the coming years as as a potential market. There's been massive changes since you were in the product team. There's been leadership, probably maybe even multiple leadership changes, at least in the time since you've left. In fact, I remember a particular event, it would have been at a partner conference in Toronto back in maybe 2012 or something, that you presented on stage. When the product in a way, should we say, it was playing catch up, it lost its direction a bit. There's a long time ago, and I can remember you presenting and almost at a mic drop moment after presenting because of some of the changes that were happening that kind of weren't moving the product or the dial on the product. But recently, we've seen some phenomenal stuff happen. Tell me about what's kind of the big highlights you have seen around, whether it's the app separation, from the platforms that was seen. What are the big things that you think have allowed for kind of this launch pad for this next billion-dollar potential business ahead of us?
Yeah, I think if I had to point to it, I think that the catalyst or the number one thing that's happened is that James Phillips has come in to lead the engineering side, and he's got a very targeted or passionate view of how we both sell apps and the type of investments we need to make in sales, service, marketing, ERP. So he's got a very crisp view on that. But he's also said, look, when we look at other vendors in the marketplace and how successful they've been with a platform business, both low code, no code, as well as, the more comprehensive, complete line of business app platform, he's really doubled down and he's structured the engineering team that way. So we've actually got a core set of engineers, a large core set of engineers that are purely focused on building out an application platform that allows organizations to build, and partners to build, all kinds of different apps. And then got really deliberately focused on making sure that we have that true app plat separation, and there's work to do there. Now, everyone would acknowledge that. But getting dedicated teams to focus on, this is the sales workload, and this is, the direction that we need to take. Same for service, same for field service, and so on. So I think if you look at kind of the way that the Dynamics business has grown up, it's about much more discipline and focus. And recognizing, you've been around for a long time, mate, so we've always talked about the XRM opportunity, and we've always, platform has always been a big consideration when we sell biz apps. Now we've got the opportunity to deliver a platform that means that my starting point, if I want to build a nuclear power plant management solution or, whatever the wacky things are, I don't start with kind of like a CRM and app and strip stuff out to get back to the platform. I've got that platform basis. But of course, if my core requirement is customer service or Salesforce automation, we've got these brilliant apps with fantastic IP that's been built up over 10 years to accomplish those goals. But it's nice to now have the right tool and the right level of functionality for the right customer need. So yeah, that's kind of the big structural change and vision and strategy change that's occurred.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal to see, and it's kind of like people, asked me years ago, why did you just back one little niche, if you like, just this Dynamics product out of all the Microsoft suite? And I tell you, it's been the best decision I think I've made in my life, because it's just continues to get better. And right now it's just like, even people entering from day one now, there's so much opportunity to grow with the product as it moves forward. A lot of business, I think there's going to be kind of revenue models, business models are going to be developed out of this, building any type of application on top of the platform. What do you see as the biggest opportunity for partners and to capitalize on PowerApps in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think, there's a number of aspects to the answer, but the number one thing for partners is, and for customers, it's a new mindset. It's a new way to look at, we've traditionally had in business applications, we go to an organization and a customer says, I've got challenges with providing an excellent service for customers, and so I need a contact center solution. And there's a finite set of users, and the partner goes in and sort of says, okay, well, let's look at the scope, let's structure a project, and let's go execute on that. To a world where you're sort of saying, look, we've got this platform that, yes, we can solve, and we got these apps and we can solve those problems. But it's so much more in terms of the opportunity for you, the customer, to be able to automate things, to take paper and complex processes and simplify them and digitize them, or to take legacy apps and provide an amazing mobile experience, and all have that consolidated on one single platform that is consistent in the way that you build apps, is consistent in the way that you administer apps and monitor, the insights that you've got. So there's some amazing opportunities, but it's a mindset change for the partners to actually go and say, look, we need to discover, in order for you to spend $1 million, customer, we need to identify a $5 or $10 million opportunity to justify that spend. And so that's a mindset change. I think for ISVs, it's the same. I go in and either on an industry lens or a utility lens or, whatever it might be. Now I've got a simpler starting point to go build out extensions, standalone apps, extensions for Dynamics, extensions for Office. That's a different kind of starting point, but the focus for ISVs, won't change. It's just the tool set has matured and got more focused on, being fit for purpose.
Yeah. So that's the next 6 to 12 months. What do you think a bit further out? Because we're seeing a massive release cadence where updates are pretty much hitting the platform monthly. There's 2 yearly announcements, etc. But we're seeing, it just keeps getting better. So therefore, there's going to be, if we look at the bell curve of adoption, there's going to be, early adopters, etc. But then when we hit the middle of that bell curve, let's say 2 to 3 years out, what's going to be, if you like, the opportunity then? How are people going to, if you like, change or adapt? Will we see much larger practices, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways to look at it. And I was actually with a massive construction and services company in Spain yesterday, and increasingly customers are coming to us saying, look, we recognize that a platform from Microsoft or any other vendor represents a huge opportunity, but how do we get started? And if you're talking to IT, they want to know what their role is in this new world. And so my answer to them was to sort of say, look, you need to focus on how you build up a center of excellence, both from a technical skills perspective, but also how do you get the business involved, right? So how do you get kind of your champions in the business who understand how the business works, but can play a role in rapid prototyping or even building out apps themselves? Because there's, on many apps, you don't have to be, a technical guru. Like PowerApps at its core, certainly these Canvas apps, is if Excel and PowerPoint had a baby, that's what you've got with PowerApps. And so you're able to democratize app development. but it's really important that the partner understands it's okay to kind of nurture that and enable organizations and the business to come and build out their own apps, and let IT and the partner focus on the heavy lifting around integration, around governance and security and application lifecycle management and change management. You know, like if I build an app, no matter how simple it is, and it's going to be used by 1,000 people, I got to make sure that I go through training, through proper release management, all of these disciplines. It doesn't change with a rapid development application platform. So that's kind of the mindset change. And it's about, you know, like if you look at Heathrow Airport, that is, you know, just a beautiful story of a guy who was a security guard, did some training over, you know, on a few nights at home, and then built out an app because he recognized the opportunity to replace some paper processes. Heathrow have said, look, we're going to do that. We've set up groups across the different parts of the business that are kind of like end user innovation groups. And our role as IT is to help them get the skills that they need, and be kind of that bureau that helps make sure that the apps have good quality, that from a security perspective, they meet all of the requirements. So they're both a training bureau, a governance bureau, and then they take the really complex projects and go and build those out. And I've seen partners in the UK and across the rest of Europe embrace that model and say it's not just about a big 6-month program of work now, it's multiple small bite-sized phases that if you do the initial phases well, customers will keep coming back because they know that there's a level of complexity on some of their apps that they need a partner with deep expertise to help build those out. So it's just a different model. But you know, if you talk about beyond 6 to 12 months, if you don't kind of establish a practice or a way on working, and you cling to kind of traditional implementation and partner consultant ways of working, I think you're going to struggle.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You know, the concept you gave there around, because one of the comments I've heard from a bunch of technical folks in the community is that there's no way you're going to allow a non, let's call them a citizen developer, plug into your main database or whatever it is and carry out, CRUD type processes in that environment. And of course you wouldn't, right? That'd be access to a trial, an instance that might have a replicated copy of how your business was running. But the idea of this training bureau and governance bureau is just fantastic. So you're saying, yep, you let give them a sandpit, if you like, to play in the people that are actually doing the work each day, who kind of know how to improve their job function, and then have this governance and training layer over the top.
Yeah, and it brings business and IT together like never before. Like there's a customer in Italy that we did a hackathon for. Massive investment of time as far as my time and the customer, but we had 27 teams. And the requirement of what we mandated was that every team had to have at least one business representative in it. And so the business person kind of contributed the idea, was able to kind of rapidly prototype out some of the screens and how they wanted it to look and feel. And it was an extraordinary set of ideas that came through as entries into this hackathon. But the CIO, on the day of the hackathon, was sort of saying, look, there are people working together between business and IT that have nothing to do with each other on a daily basis. And so the opportunity for transformation and, let's face it, there's a culture at tons of organizations where IT go, look, my job would be a lot easier if it wasn't for that pesky business. And business don't look at IT as kind of a trusted advisor or someone who's going to add value. And so having this platform and these set of tools can really bridge that gap and realize value faster for the business, but make IT the hero, and without compromising on what IT are trying to achieve, and without compromising what the business needs to get done.
Yeah. Hey, that's just once again a great spin-off of, it's actually very much a team building type experience that, it can foster and create in an organization.
Exactly. Like it, and every time that I've talked to enterprise customers, and so these ones are kind of tens of thousands of users, always the realization for the customers that want to go big on it is this is a new, it's just a new world in terms of the way people want to go and build apps and get stuff done. And for CIOs and the opportunity, for our partners and for Microsoft in general is to go, look, if we don't go in there and kind of be that incumbent and be the platform for organizations, there's plenty of other vendors, and in many cases, the business can just slap down a credit card and make that happen. So you're better off kind of making the investment and then getting the word out and getting it embedded in how the business works so that you have that insight and governance and all of that stuff that you want from an enterprise-wide platform.
Yeah. So good, so good. Can you eliminate a bit of confusion that is in the market for me? And what I'm talking about is, how do you explain to people the concept of the Power Platform, Common Data Service for Apps, Dynamics 365, Common Data Model, and then the Canvas model driven, maybe even thrown in there to a degree, but not so much. But how do you kind of sort out these different terminologies and how they interconnect and relate to each other, or if you like, represent the same thing?
Sure. Yeah. What I typically do is I start with the background on why you would want a platform in the first place. I think that kind of, if you level set, then it makes the actual technology conversation a lot easier. And if you look at the broad themes about why people want a platform, it's what we've spoken about over the last sort of 5-10 minutes. But whether it's I've got tons of paper processes and complex processes, I've got kind of maybe a fractured or broken relationship between business and IT. I've got a finite level of resource and time and budget and expertise in IT to build things out with ever increasing business expectations. The security landscape now, particularly in Europe, of GDPR and data residency and all of this sort of stuff. So all of that background lends itself to say, well, look, having a platform that you can then, both you and the business can build out tons of apps really quickly and solve problems and unlock productivity. That's the background. And so you get heads nodding that way. And then you kind of go, all right, well, Microsoft's introduced this Power Platform. Let me take you through what it is. And I talk about, look, its foundation is Azure. Like if you look at the future of Microsoft, and one of the pillars of its long-term success, it's Azure. This globally available, redundant, data resident, all of these promises and services that Azure represent, we're built on that. So one, have that level of confidence. And then we get into, well, the platform is about building apps and extensions on top of Dynamics and Office and building standalone apps. So this is not, that's another thing that we talk about is we separate this as a Dynamics thing. Yes, it's built by the Dynamics engineering organization, but it's a cloud in its own right that works with Azure and Office. It's a cross Microsoft sort of technology. And Dynamics 365 is built on top of that platform. So Dynamics is the apps, and the Power Platform underpins all of that. So that's another way of setting it up. And then I talk about the three legs of the stool. So, PowerApps, where you're able to, rapidly build out applications of varying degrees of complexity and scope. You've got Microsoft Flow, which is the enterprise workflow engine for Microsoft, and is continuing to get, massive investment as far as not only individuals' productivity of, if this, then that for notifications and approvals, to true enterprise-wide business process orchestration. And then finally, Power BI, how do you kind of take all that data plus all of the rest of the data that's in your world and make sense of it and do new ways on visualizing and driving insights, as well as kind of natural language processing of saying, how many sales orders did I fulfill today versus having to know deep, functions and T-SQL and all of this sort of stuff. So all of those three come together. And then we talk about, well, at some point in time, you need somewhere to put your data. Now, the Power Platform will sit across, any of your data, whether it's on-prem in SQL or Oracle or MySQL. It'll connect to cloud services like Salesforce and Dynamics and all of that sort of stuff. But many of the apps that you're looking to replace and modernize are built on Access and Excel. And so they're functionally brilliant, but they don't have a mobile experience. They don't have kind of cloud scale. And so we offer the common data service for apps. So at its core, CDS is a database, a relational database that is highly configurable, that doesn't need database administrators, can be tailored in terms of how you want to structure and store your data. But it's, then when you look on top of that, it's got integration capabilities and elements. You can define a role-based security model. You can define forms and views and business processes and dashboarding and all that sort of stuff. So it's both at its core a data store. At its extended level, it's a true line of business app development platform. But this is a new era for Microsoft, and Satya's brought this in that says it's no longer about if you want to accomplish something you can, but you've got to use everything from Microsoft. We say, look, if you've got a data store or a line of business app that you've made a big investment in, we're not talking about rip and replace. What we're saying is we can connect to that, and that's where our data connectors story comes in, where we've got over 250 different data connectors for all kinds of, cloud services and on-prem databases, or you can kind of build your own, right? So that's how I set the scene. And then the final piece is to sort of say, look, in terms of the apps that you want to provide for your organization, what's the number one reason why a line of business app, CRM or ERP fails is because no one uses it because they view it as too complex, right? And so having the ability to build out simple experiences for specific tasks, like at Microsoft, if I want to book my vacation or holiday time, I've got a simple Power App to do that. If I want to do time and expenses, I don't need a full line of business app to do that. And my organization can go and rapidly kind of compose, I think is the right word, compose those apps and rapidly distribute them. So that's kind of, I generally don't refer to Canvas and model driven because it kind of becomes confusing initially. But I do talk about, the ability for you to rapidly build task and process specific apps, or like the example I give is GDPR acknowledgement. Every employee basically in organizations in Europe have at some point in time have to acknowledge that, hey, my email's going to get monitored, or I'm under CCTV footage, or this is the information's going to be collected about me. This is what we're going to share outside. And I go, I need to go tick, 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 acknowledge, sign. That's a perfect avenue for a Canvas app, something really simple. But beyond that, the organization has got tons of other HR processes and things that they want to do, that they want a core set of users to be able to manage, right? And that's where a model-driven, a full line of business app comes into play, where I want to be able to manage multiple aspects of employee management, or I want to do workflows that go and push data to different systems. So you've got that spectrum of complexity, and you build the app that meets the need of the user community that you need. So that's kind of how I position it. Generally, I get more than 5 minutes to to give that description, but at its heart, that's how I kind of put it into the picture for the customer.
Yeah, I like the way you've kind of said, let's stop talking about the tools as in model-driven or Canvas apps. They're kind of like tools that we're using, and it's really refocusing that on the business scenario, which is what are the tasks and processes, apps that we're building, which I think, yeah, is a good kind of visual shift in your mind rather than a lot of us in the community kind of stay, fixated on the tools and what they do rather than, the end solutions they provide.
Yeah, and I think even if you look at the tool set, Mark, like the designer, the maker experience, it's bringing those together. So it's not going to be that long before, a power app is a power app is a power app. It just depends on the scope and complexity and the group of users that are going to make use of it and the devices that it runs on. So, the quicker that you can kind of get into that mindset and get into that way on explaining that to customers, the less they get caught up on, oh, well, should I use a model-driven or a canvas? The reality is you're just building apps to solve business problems and boost productivity. How that manifests itself in terms of the experience and the device, it actually doesn't matter. It's that ability to build that spectrum of apps that is the most crucial element you need to land.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. What's when we look at the road ahead for the Power Platform and really, taking in things like, we're kind of like in the dawn really of AI and all the different machine learning, cognitive services and things like that. Where could you, and I know this is not based on any roadmap or anything, but where could you potentially see the way we interface, even with this technology, might change in time? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, well, you bring up a good point on AI. Like the platform represents one of the most tangible ways right now for you to consume and use a lot of the AI services that Microsoft are investing in. You can use them today with many of these connectors. So, image recognition, connecting to IoT services, all of that sort of stuff are now within reach because you can use the camera and you can, like we've got customers that are doing it now for field service kind of scenarios where you take a photo of a part and figure out which one is the right one to use for the repair. All of that stuff is already available to kind of compose apps. So we look at this as we look at the platform as probably the best opportunity for organizations to glue and bring AI into, day-to-day tasks and processes. And I think what I would say is, longer term, we're just going to accelerate that and provide more opportunities because Microsoft's vision is to kind of democratize AI. So it makes sense then that you want a platform that enables you to, take advantage of that. So you're not having to write, thousands of lines of code and take weeks and months to do it. You want to be able to plug in and experiment with it and try new things. That's Microsoft's kind of vision on AI, and we've now got a tool set to enable that to happen. So, that's definitely one opportunity that you're going to see today, but it's going to get tons of investment moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think we'll get to the point where, how can I say this, that AI will start producing its own code?
I'm not sure whether Skynet's going to get self-aware anytime soon, but look, I would say that it's more about, certainly for the foreseeable future, these disparate AI services that you want to take advantage of and being able to glue them into the apps that you want. Beyond that, I'm not an AI crystal ball gazer, but the opportunity is definitely huge.
Yeah, interesting. What vertical industries have you kind of identified as prime targets for the platform, the Power Platform now? Kind of, if you like, what do you see as that, the early adopters potentially industry-wise?
So we've definitely found fin services is a great way because there's tons of financial services organizations that still have a lot of paper processes, or they have specific things that they do that they don't want a kind of a comprehensive line of business app to achieve. Like Metro Bank in the UK, they built a beautiful, simple mobile experience for branch greeters. So you come into the bank, you're either a customer or you're not. The person greeting you can recognize and tell who you are, can then identify what your need is and connect you to the right subject matter expert in the branch. So we're seeing a lot of that both in the retail banking as well as just, replacement of lots of paper processes or time-consuming processes. And if you extrapolate that theme, that lends itself to public sector as well, where there's lots and lots of paper processes that need to be replaced. But I think if you look at common themes that are right across every industry, almost every industry has some kind of inspection or audit process, right? And so we're seeing tons and tons of these types of apps being built, where someone wants to rapidly digitize a process, store that data centrally for compliance reasons, or do an inspection, but back that up with photos of what I'm doing, right? And being able to take advantage of all of the device capabilities without writing code. That's the value prop. That's what people get excited. But I'd say, fin services, manufacturing, and PubSec are kind of the ones that we're seeing traction really, immediately. But we can see use cases for almost every industry.
Yeah. So, you kind of touched on the area of mixed reality, and we've seen now the whole mixed reality suite from Microsoft has been brought into the business applications. Are you seeing that starting to pick up and adopt? Is that kind of in your remit at the moment, or is that outside?
So it's an interesting point. So from an organizational perspective, we're still kind of figuring out the best way on how we can kind of build a business around that and figuring out how we resource it. What I would say is that there are immediate priorities more on the app side. Field service is the classic one where, being able to send a technician out and have kind of a much more visual way on identifying repairs and how to get them done and that sort of stuff. So I think you'll find that, MR for certainly the short to mid-term is predominantly going to be anchored around the Dynamics apps. But we definitely, by it being added to the apps, those controls and those, integration and connections for, building out any kind of Power App is going to be there. And like I said, we're still from a Microsoft, sales and marketing organization, still trying to kind of figure out how that fits into the world. But it doesn't slow down the innovation that's occurring. But, my gut and observation so far point to it being much more part of the app side of the world from Dynamics and more on the service and field service to start off with.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a few examples at various Microsoft events, with fixing motorcycle lights and things like that. And I think that it's, the opportunity for that is oil rigs, anything in the outback, it's very remote, that the skill set to get them there would be really expensive. Aircraft, a specific problem on an aircraft where the engineer's on the other side of the world. Mining industry, massive opportunity. Space has got to be a big deal. And, wind farms, any of these type of renewable resources that are generally in very remote locations, mate, I think that there's got to be a massive cost benefit to use mixed reality and supporting those type of infrastructures than putting people, on site.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, interestingly, another use case that's come up, very recently in the last sort of couple of months, is, believe it or not, has been in HR and new employee onboarding. So, how do you kind of visualize new processes, facilities that you need to be able to use, all of that sort of stuff. Being able to give that, not just, hey, here's a video or here's a document, but give people an immersive view on their new workplace or their new equipment or facilities, the HR use case is fascinating.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if it could be used for border security at some point as well.
Yeah.
I did a lot in that when I was in Oz, and it's expensive to have a sworn officer, if you like, at some of these remote airports now that are becoming border crossings. They're becoming internationally aware type airports, but you could put a security guard in there with a headset with somebody back in Canberra, for example, that can conduct the interview and understand the individual and the nuances of the psychology potentially around it. But interesting.
No, it's not. I mean, we're just scratching the surface right now on MR and AI.
Yeah, awesome. Can you give me an example of partners who are kind of leading the charge in switching, and they might be brand new as a new startups from the partner ecosystem that are realizing that, Dynamics has been, if you like, got us to where we are at the moment. But there's this whole new world and world of opportunity now presented to us. Are you seeing any particular partners or potentially entering the channel that are really getting on board quickly, skilling up, and making the most of the opportunity?
Yeah, so I can't specifically give names, but what I would say, it's an interesting kind of world that we're in now. So there's no question any of the Dynamics partners, but any ones who've been focusing on CRM are automatically, that have been doing XRM, are automatically kind of model-driven platform partners, and so that skill set is not doesn't really have to be extended. It's more the business model that we spoke about before. But the other interesting kind of partners that we're encountering. In fact, in the UK and Western Europe, we've got a partner program where we're bringing in a select group of Office 365 or modern workplace partners who've been building, Canvas apps or PowerApps for extensions to SharePoint and Outlook add-ins and all of that sort of stuff, and saying, look, your opportunity here is to build apps that leverage everything that they use in their productivity tool set, but bring in data from other line of business apps, whether it's Dynamics or SAP or Salesforce or what have you, and fusing that together with files and unstructured and semi-structured data from OneDrive and SharePoint, and bringing that together with relational or structured line of business data. That's a huge opportunity. And then we've got a few Azure partners that are, they've been doing infrastructure and deep SQL Azure and, all of that sort of stuff for mission critical and data lake for BI and all that sort of stuff. And they see the common data service as a very complementary technology to say, look, we can solve these heavy lifting problems for you and consolidate data. But here's, the common data service that allows you to rapidly compose transactional relational databases that you can then build out all these apps and will help you kind of get that journey. And so, and then by the way, you'll need, DBAs and deep technical expertise for, the data lake and the SQL Azure and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of this other stuff can be pushed more to, consultants or business analysts or what have you. And so they're seeing that opportunity. And also because we're built on Azure, the ability to drive kind of Azure consumption and further cement Azure into an organization, they see it as a huge, services opportunity. So I would say actually that, if you look at Office 365 and Azure partners who are used to kind of selling in and licensing the whole organization, getting their head around how to position and kind of define a platform strategy is more in the domain of those partners. than the Dynamics partners that have traditionally gone in and said, okay, well, we know that you need to improve this function, or this is what you've asked for. We can go help you. So, every different kind of partner has an opportunity to play. It just depends on what their starting point is. So we're seeing partners right across the board. And I think the other thing is, from a Microsoft business perspective, we've now got a whole swathe of partners who can have a Dynamics conversation that they never would have had before. We're reaching customers now that traditionally we might not have talked to because they had another vendor as the incumbent, ERP or CRM solution. We've got a proposition to leverage that, but add so much more value to the organization. So it's such an exciting time for Dynamics and Microsoft as a whole.
Yeah, awesome. Reuben, time's flowing. Before we get on to some quick-fire questions, is there anything else you want to add? Because the quick-fire are kind of more tongue-in-cheek and rather than focused on what we've been discussing. But is there anything you want to add before we switch?
No worries. My view is, look, if you're not evaluating the Power Platform or figuring out a strategy for your business, then you need to start that journey. And there's so much that you can do. Make sure you go and check out as a starting point, check out the PowerApps blog, check out the Power BI blog, because, you said it yourself, Mark, stuff is coming thick and fast, and getting ahead of that's really important. And the second thing is, it's so approachable. Just get a trial and start banging away at it. Build out some apps for your own business. Do some playing around. You'll be pretty stunned to see the types of things that you can achieve with the platform with a small time investment.
Awesome. Quick fire time. What's the one productivity tool that you use every day?
Teams. Microsoft Teams.
Yep, I would agree with that. What's your best purchase under $100? And it can't be food or wine or alcohol or anything like that.
It can't be food or wine?
Nah.
All right, easy. Liverpool Football Club shirt.
Which leads to my next, why are you so passionate about Liverpool FC?
Oh, so the short answer is I grew up at a time when Liverpool were winning everything under the sun. In Oz and New Zealand, you had one live football match, every year. It was the FA Cup final, and Liverpool were always there. And then it was cemented with Craig Johnston being the first Aussie to make it to the Premier League and played for Liverpool. So, it was just meant to be.
Nice. And who do you recommend as a guest for the podcast in the future?
Oh, the list is long but distinguished. But I'd love for you guys to hear from the engineering leadership, whether that's Charles Lamanna. He's kind of leading the charge around the platform. Yeah. He'd be a great guest to further discuss what's going on with the platform.
Yeah, so booked right now. I've got Charles booked. I've got Ryan Jones, Ryan Cunningham, and Stephen Stefiano all coming. As in, I'm actually recording them, two of them today. So.
Oh, fantastic! No, you've already got the guests that I'd recommend for sure.
Excellent, fantastic, Reuben. It's been great to have you on the show. If people kind of want to keep track of any kind of stuff around business on the social side, are you on Twitter or something like that?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm probably more active. I've been less active on Twitter than I probably should be or would like to. But check me out on Twitter or LinkedIn.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm always keen to chat with ISVs and understand their journey. If you know anyone that has a product that runs on Dynamics 365 or the Power Platform, I'd love to have a chat. Can I ask you a favor before you go? Producing these podcasts takes a lot of effort, and the podcast can only be successful if you, the community, are getting value from it. If you enjoyed the show, can you please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes? You can do this by going to nz365guy.com/iTunes. If you want to check out the show notes for this show, please go to nz365guy.com/68. Bye for now.